We now turn to Professor Okey Ikechukwu, Chairman, National Subcommittee for the Burial of Emmanuel Iwuanyanwu, who joins us from our Abuja studio to speak to us about the life and times of the late President General of the Ohanaeze Ndigbo. Thank you for joining us on Newsday.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now, bring us up to speed on how preparations are going, especially for the burial of the late President General of Ndigbo, Ohanaeze Ndigbo.
Okay, first of all, the National Burial Committee was set up, headed by Senator Ben Obi, a high chief who is distinguished and highly respected all over Igbo land. The secretary to that committee is also a distinguished Nigerian and Igbo son, Ambassador Okey, who incidentally is also the Secretary General of Ohanaeze and Secretary to Chief Iwuanyanwu until his demise as president. The programs are all farmed out. Briefings have taken place. Committees are very busy, including mine. On the 16th of this month, which is next week, there will be a day of tributes in Lagos at Okey Hotel and Suites. On the 18th, we'll be back here in Abuja for also a day of tributes at the Ecumenical Center in Abuja here. Then on the 26th, there will be the arrival of the body in the east, then a ceremony at the Ohanaeze headquarters in Enugu. Then there will be actually another set of tributes at the Opera Square. It is after all of that, the next set of activities will be on the 29th, when there will be a service of songs, at Ata, Ikeduru. Then commendation service at the Catol, where before the 31st. The 31st is the actual interment, the last burial rites for the distinguished Nigerian, Igbo man, African, exceptionally voluble and active businessman across several sectors. Mm-hmm.
Very good,
so
Professor.
That's the detail about this audio quality activities.
Mm. Okay. Very good, Professor Ikechukwu. Thanks for enlightening us on that. But what would you regard as the late Emmanuel Iwuanyanwu's greatest legacy during his time?
His greatest legacy can be described as resting on three pillars. Effort, that's diligence, based on knowledge. Second, a sense of equity in everything he does and with everybody. And thirdly, and most importantly, the desire to live in peace in a world that is diverse. If you take the first leg, the man was successful as a businessman. In his own right, he owned a construction company, he owned an airline, he was into estates, among other things. In all of these areas, he excelled. Not because he was favored, but because he diligently pursued all he needed to do to succeed in those chosen areas. He was in aviation. Then in sports, he owned the Iwuanyanwu National. Sorry, I'm still on aviation. Yes, he had Oriental Airlines, but let's not forget that the Imo Airport today was built by Imo people, by individuals contributing, some of them 3 naira, some of them 50 kobo at that time. The committee was headed by Evan Iwuanyanwu. Chief Iwuanyanwu contributed $2 million of his own money. Go and check at that time and check how old he is. Mm. That's why you'll find that when you hear the chairman of the National Burial Committee saying that Iwuanyanwu must be remembered as an example of what youth can do, people don't understand what that means. If you look at what he achieved at the age within which a lot of people who are older than that today are calling themselves youth, you know that the burial committee is not just interested in the interment, but in building a legacy. When you say, let there be a commemoration, let there be a immortalization of Iwuanyanwu, it's not to build a statue and write Iwuanyanwu and it. It's to create sets of activities and programs that will enable young people realize that youth is a time for action and that Iwuanyanwu represented every form of commendable action in every aspect of our lives. He was in politics. It was a politics for his people within the Nigerian state where he called for equity. Do you have any regrets? Among other things, he would have loved to see Nigeria restructured. Mm. Not because there's a particular structure he prefers, but because he thinks there should be a structure that guarantees equity and a sense of equality between all the parties. What does he think of it? What did he think of the Southeast today before he left? He would have loved to see somebody like Nnamdi Kanu released, not because he's an Igbo man, but because his matter could also be handled somewhat differently. So if you look at every sphere he touched, sports, business, aviation, the media, the champion newspapers, when it came on, for how long it's been around, the policy of that paper, the reputation of that paper for balanced reporting, the reputation of Iwuanyanwu as not interfering with the editorial autonomy and integrity of the paper. And overall, as people would say, and I'm sure you heard the secretary to the committee, I think the other week, it was in the public domain during a press briefing where he explained in detail some of the genuine desires and, if you like, pains of Iwuanyanwu, who would have loved to see not the type of Nigeria he's seen or he saw before he left, but a Nigeria where if you went to any part of the country and said, I'm a Nigerian, those who are seeing you for the first time would say, welcome, my brother. So Iwuanyanwu, physically a big person, mentally a very big person in his ideas. You look in the domain of achievement, also very big. Within and outside Nigeria, across the country, he can be localized as an Igbo man. He can be localized as an Igbo leader because in all his endeavors, in business, in sports, recall the year he bailed out this country in sports. Junior and I think it was All Nations or Cup of Nations Cup. He rescued the national endeavor in that regard. Otherwise, it would have been disgrace, both in financial terms and in terms of reputation. Mm-hmm. So this is not an Igbo burial. It's not a Southeast burial. It's not an Ohanese burial. It's the attempt to give final respects to a man who, if you take his profile to any culture within and outside Nigeria, whoever listens to that profile, whoever listens to his trajectory, whoever listens to the things he has done would say, you're talking about a great man. So that's what this whole thing is about. It's not about a ceremony, it's not about a committee that somebody will get up and make a speech. It's about an effort to hold up somebody who represents a legacy.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Prof. Now, let's look at his efforts, especially regarding Ohanese Ndigbo. You just talked about what he would have loved to see, especially looking at the case of Nnamdi Kanu. But what do you think? How do you think he responded, especially to the agitations of Ohanese Ndigbo, and also in uniting the Southeast?
For him, the acceptance of the President Generalship of the Ohanese was done with great reluctance. It was a call for service. And he said, listen, we all know that there's an age you get to. When somebody calls you, you say, no, please, I have juniors who can deal with that. But the leaders met and told him, called him, Father, you have a duty to your children at this time. Everybody, his own family, they didn't like it. But when it was presented that with your profile, and since everybody knows you're not looking for anything, your integrity and your sense of objectivity is likely to become a rallying point. That's why he stepped forward. And among other things, he then began to unite some of the so-called factions. Of course, there will always be people who disagree. There were issues of all sorts. But he said that for as long as we're doing what is good for Ndigbo, the issues of whatever type can always be discussed while progress is going on. So he tried to be that uniting force. He tried to create, if you like, a common ground. It didn't prevent some people from also going on air, going on in the media to say all kinds of things. But the question he always will ask, and Ambassador Muche will confirm that is there any family you go to and you don't find people who disagree? Is there any place you go to and you don't find both naughty boys and girls? You know, so that's him. Magnanimous, determined to drive the common good and not distracted by the dissenting voices, provided the voices are not muzzled and they have a right to the point of view they are projecting.
Ikechukwu Chairman, National Subcommittee for the Burial of Emmanuel, the late Emmanuel Iwuanyanwu, would like to thank you for your thoughts on this icon.